Welcome to the Pop Cult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
This is the Pop Cult Podcast. I'm Seth.
I'm Ariana.
And today we will be talking about Martin Scorsese's latest, possibly final movie.
Dun, dun,
He's an old bastard. He could drop dead at any moment. But before we do that, we are going to talk about the comedy Bottoms, which is from director Emma Seligman, I think is how you pronounce it. And it stars Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri. Bottoms is about a pair of unpopular best friends, PJ and Josie, who start a high school fight club to meet girls and lose their virginity. They soon find themselves in over their heads when the most popular students start beating each other up in the name of self-defense, which I find to not be an accurate description of the movie. So, Ariana, what are just your initial thoughts about Bottoms?
I think that it is strongly a mid-tier movie. So there are some funny bits about it. And here's the thing. I like watching Rachel Sennett on screen. I love watching Ayo Edebiri on screen. There's something about her that I'm just engaged
Very
in.
magnetic
Yes.
kind of actor.
That having been said, this felt like a stretched out comedy skit.
Yeah. My thoughts were very similar. And when we heard that this Bottoms movie was coming out, I think we saw somewhere that it was based on a series of Comedy Central web shorts.
Yeah.
And so we went and watched those and liked them. I thought they were funny.
Those were great.
And I think part of what happened here was they had the personalities of these actors bouncing off of each other that worked great in short form, where you did not need much plot. You didn't need a lot of character development. Then they put them in a 90-minute movie with a script that felt like a first draft. It felt like it was very irregular. The humor was like there'd be moments that were very funny, and then there would be long stretches where I didn't laugh at all. And I could tell I was supposed to be laughing in a lot of scenes. And there's a part of me that goes, is this just, the disconnect between millennial and Zoomer senses of humor? But the more I've looked at the consensus about this movie, they are kind of agreeing with you. It is just kind of a mid-tier, like 3-star, 3.5-star movie.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk more about like what didn't work, what did work. On the surface, it feels progressive. We have two leads who are, open lesbians. There is lots of gay romance in the movie. And that's good but then I also didn't understand like what Emma Seligman was trying to do, because it's clear this movie is influenced by everything from like the Adam McKay comedies of the early 2000s, but also things like Clueless and Heathers. And I could never tell if this movie was meant to parody some of those things or if it was meant to be an homage to those things. And I don't feel like the movie really knew what it wanted to be in relation to what it inspired it.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, for example, to Booksmart. Even though I'm not Olivia
Wilde. I'm not a big fan.
I'm not a big fan. I did not like her second film debut at all. I thought it was a strongly written script. And they also fed a lot about the dynamic between these two characters. They included stuff that was out of character into those characters, but it was also well edited, and it made you feel as if there was a bigger world outside of just school and studying for them.
In Booksmart, it felt like there was a plot structure that was very solid. Every scene propelled the story forward and developed the characters further.
Yeah.
So that by the time we reached the end, you didn't have a sense of is it over yet?
Yes.
And with Bottoms, if I could chart my interest in the movie, it would just be like a roller coaster, up and down, where I'd go oh, okay, now this looks like an interesting scene. And it doesn't really play out that interestingly. So I kind of got bored and distracted. And then I would notice, okay, now this looks like we're in a new place. We're setting up something new, maybe this. And then you might chuckle at a thing here or there. but ultimately it just didn't have the confidence of something like Booksmart.
No, and I think of sorts it did lack this ability of expanding the world outside of just being high school. We are introduced to either character's parents.
What's weird is we're introduced to Hazel's mom.
Yeah,
and I don't really know why she's in the movie.
And the thing
other than
is,
like for one
Hazel's
plot thing.
mom is at a distance. We don't really hear her like have a conversation with Hazel. It's she's upstairs, Hazel's downstairs.
Her only purpose in the movie is to be a horny divorced woman so that one plot thing can happen.
Yes.
That's it.
Beyond that, the most major like adult character is Mr. G, played by Marshawn Lynch, which I thought he was really good. Like he had great chemistry with everybody.
He's not a great actor.
No.
But he is great at playing himself.
Yes.
Which is
that's
what he was doing here. And he was like, yep, you got it.
I think of sorts when you think about Shiva Baby, which is mainly portrayed in one location, right? It felt as if like the director wanted to stay within certain locations, but then lacked a development of all the other characters, because even though like some of it can be funny to find out new information about certain people, it still was paper thin.
Yeah. And I thought a lot about Shiva Baby after we watched this movie, and the ways that Shiva Baby felt so much more confident. And I think what we saw was a display of how a director can have such mastery over one tone.
Yeah.
But then when you put them on a project with a completely different tone, you watch them stumble and falter, and you can go like, oh wow, like they're talented, but this was so underbaked. It needed to go back in for a little while, and they needed to like fine tune a lot of things.
And it's not a thing that where I'm saying I will never watch anything from this director.
Oh
again.
no.
She's young, so yeah. I could give the permission of it just being like, all right, this is a stumbling block, but it was interesting because during the promo, she was in a lot of the questions that they would have. The interviews. She
was with Sennett and Edibiri and a lot of stuff.
And it felt like they were trying to also highlight her talents during it. But if it was solely on the fact that, like, when you look at the script, it felt as if they weren't daring enough to then go like, well, let's go to these characters and figure out what they're about.
Well, because like the whole central love interest thing between Isabel and Brittany, who are the two girls that PJ and Josie are after, I kept trying to figure out why, though. I never really got a sense of either of them having their characters developed in a way that made me go, oh, that's why they're attracted to them. Other than just they're externally hot by like traditional standards. That's it.
Like this
that's
thing
it.
Of like it's show don't tell.
Yeah.
And we just got a lot of tell from as to like, why is it that, Isabel is interesting? Why is Brittany interesting?
We don't see that.
But like, we don't see it. It was just like, oh, at one point Brittany gets mad and goes like, everybody forgets like that I'm extremely driven and that I have a small business, and like being and like the line delivery was great, because here's the thing. I've seen Kaya Gerber like in other stuff, mostly in American Horror Story, and I felt like she was awful. And here she felt so natural.
She was more at ease.
Yeah. And like it just was lacking, and it kind of made me sad, because especially when there was promos with all the cast, and I want to be like, I barely got to know any of the cast. I barely got to like want to cheer for them.
Yeah. One of the highlights for me in all of that, though, was Ruby Cruz as Hazel, who's kind of this secondary character who is also...
She's not Ruby Cruz. She's
Ruby Cruz, who plays Hazel. Yeah. Never correct me on my own podcast. No. And I had remembered her from season 2 of Castle Rock, where she played young Annie Wilkes, which is a totally different character than what she plays here. And she was more captivating to me than Sennett and Edibiri, which was so weird because I love those actresses so much. But I mean, it was great that she was in the movie, because the way she plays off the two of them makes her often the funniest character in a scene.
Yeah.
She reminded me the most of like an Adam McKay character, where it's this like funny, charming, dumb.
Yes. And I think it's sort of like, if we're going to compare it to teen comedies, like for example, we have Booksmart, we also have
I thought of another movie this reminded me
Super
of.
bad.
Assassination Nation. The Sam Levinson movie.
Yeah.
Which, but I thought if somebody sat me down right now and said, would you rather rewatch Bottoms right now or Assassination Nation? I think I'd pick Assassination Nation, because at least like this movie, because it's trying to do comedy, but it also feels like it's trying to comment on something, but I never really understood like what are you trying to say? Assassination Nation, I got what that movie was trying to say because it is like a sledgehammer. But I would also say Assassination Nation is more visually interesting than Bottoms.
Well, I think it also has to do with the fact that like Bottoms has a lot of silence between line delivery, and it's supposed to be for you to pick up what other conversations are happening in the background and like laugh at that, which I appreciated it at the beginning. But then after a while, it just was kind of hard to bear because there were still those moments of silence, which you can remove like during editing, but it felt really hard when it came to like Senate and Edibiri when they're alone together, when there is nothing to really laugh about, when we don't really get as to what is lovable about both of these characters. Like, I don't get to know if like Josie has any hobbies, if there's anything beyond just her being like gay. And it's supposed to be like, oh, people used to hate you before because you're gay, but it's different when you're like an ugly, like no talented loser.
Well, they keep saying they're ugly, and I'm like, okay, these two women are clearly not ugly women. Like, you didn't try to make them look ugly. It's just like, who thinks they're ugly? I don't understand that part.
Thing to do with the fact that they're not trying to show off the way that everyone else is showing off. Like, for example, I did enjoy when Isabel and Josie are together, and Isabel picks up a hoodie and says, oh, I always wanted one of these, but my mom said that they hide your figure and make you look ugly. Like, it was just like a passing remark about like having a mom that's completely wanting you to look a certain way the whole entire time. I wish that they had digged in a little deeper on that versus just like these passing comments that work better in a sketch because it's short.
Yes, I feel like this, once again, going back to the short form this came from, it, and also like the nature of comedy duos like Sennett and Edibiri. We think of Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello. When you would put them in movies, I know a lot of people love the Abbott and Costello movies. I don't. Mm-hmm. And you try to drag that comedy out for longer, it just doesn't work in the same way that the shorts do.
No.
So I almost felt like this should have gone the route of Broad City. So like Broad City for Zoomers. And you just make a Bottoms series or something.
Yeah, just limited series.
20 to 30-minute chunks, I think this works better. You put them in a 90-minute movie. After the first few minutes and we kind of get what the humor is, it doesn't really develop anything beyond that.
Yeah, and if it was a mini series and we get to see like the life of like the jocks and why is it that like PJ and Josie are on the lower tier, what happened during that time, because you're also like you're putting this information that, for example, that PJ and Josie were friends since the second grade. Like,
but we don't really know anything about that.
But it's like explain that dynamic, because it's supposed to be like, if we're gonna, for example, compare it to Superbad.
Yeah. I understood Josie, that friendship.
Like Josie's supposed to be Michael Sarah, and then like PJ is supposed to be
Jonah Hill.
But the problem is, like, we just see most of the time PJ just kind of being a bully. And
yeah, she's a very unpleasant character.
So we don't really get moments of feeling empathy for her, of her just like trying to do something and not get her way. In fact, when it comes to the reveal about her like romance plot line, you don't even feel bad for her. You're just kind of like, of course she deserves that. She's a dumb who didn't ask any further questions. But it was also the problem that nobody was like, oh, hey, I think you just like this Brittany because she's hot. And it's something that Josie does like tell her, but there's never a moment, like, for example,
film doesn't seem to absorb that.
Yeah. Like, for example, in Clueless, they do this amazing thing that when somebody when she's like, Cher is going around walking and she goes and she finally realizes, oh, I'm in love with so and so. Like, she has that revelation. or, you know, in Booksmart of it being like, oh, she has a crush, but realizes like her crush is actually dating her friend's crush, and she has to like go back and be like, reveal the bad news. There's none of that tension. And so when they break off from being friends, you don't have that feeling like, oh God, they're never going to get back together as pals, because they're still both losers. It's not as if one was adopted into another clique and was hanging out with them. It's mostly like, and it's supposed to be like, I feel like a storyline that should have been broader with Hazel in the mix.
Yeah, because that character is the element that makes the movie worth continuing to watch, and she's certainly not in enough of it.
Yeah, it's sort of like, if we're gonna have that feeling of sadness of them breaking apart, you should have made Hazel, PJ, and Josie like a stronger friendship versus we're the best friends and this is the third wheel.
Yeah. The movie also spends a lot of time referencing David Fincher's Fight Club, and I'm still not quite sure why. Because when you think about the movie Fight Club, there are two ways of reading it. There's reading it based on the way it was received by a certain portion of the male population, which was incorrectly. And then there was the intent of the film, which was a critique on like toxic masculinity and capitalism and the way these things are intertwined with each other. I don't know why they bring up Fight Club other than the fact that their self-defense club means they have scenes of them punching each other and like bleeding. And it doesn't really go anywhere. They bring it back for the third act and the big finale. And I guess it plays a plot role there. But from a thematic point of view, I didn't understand, like, okay, so what are you like saying about this? Like, what does this mean?
Yeah, it felt as if like you needed a little bit more like a montage or editing about them fighting each other and them learning new strategies, but then also being okay with the fact that they're breaking each other's noses, leaving bruises on each other.
Like the Fight Club is heavily advertised in the marketing of this movie, but in watching it, I didn't feel it was that big a part of the movie.
Yeah. So should we talk about the weird implications about the end of the film? I like the whole violence of it.
Well, yeah, I saw somebody's review and I kind of agree with it. What they said, underneath the comedy, then they're like, I love that it's, you know, trying to do progressive things, but there's something regressive about it in just like there's this mean-spiritedness to it that is really disturbing. And it's something that I've noted showing up a lot in American media as we see a regression of portrayals of like positive sex or sex in comedies. I feel like that's being replaced by graphic violence. And that's really weird to me.
I think it had this missed opportunity to talk about female rage.
Yeah.
And like towards the end, it just felt like I was watching a scene from the movie Nobody.
Yeah.
But it was just a bunch of teenage girls that were doing it for a reason that didn't make sense. Like there was never like a moment where when you see like a smaller woman like really go out like raging, that you would have like a bunch of boys go like, oh wait, hold up guys, we shouldn't do this. Instead it was kind of like, well, it's, you know, due to the plot that, you know, the other, you know, this other organization or team has killed people in the past, like this is allowed. This is like equal ground.
And it's part of like, there is a surreality over the movie. Like, it's supposed to be a very absurd comedy, but even then, like that's another tone that the movie isn't sure about.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to commit to be almost like a Tim and Eric Bizarro world? Or is this grounded in some sort of reality? And that was another thing I was never clear about.
Yeah. And there should have been like some kind of some kind of consequences as to that. Or at the least, like, you know, it would have been an interesting thing of having one of the characters being like, oh God, I'm gonna throw up, realizing all the like,
because the implication they like murdered these guys.
Yeah. And I think it's just sort of, it makes me sad because it's just sort of like,
it's not even like slapstick. This is like slapstick extreme.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I can understand that you just like, maybe like it, like there was a part of them when they were talking about this film is like, they really wanted to be able to see like women fighting,
right,
which I
do
understand.
An action sequence.
Like, I understand that. but I think you also have to convey that anger. It can't be just because. It can't be, well, now it's happening. Like,
well, it can't just be like a superficial, well, I want to make this scene in the movie, but I'm not going to think about like, how do I incorporate the scene in a way that gels with everything else, that doesn't get across the wrong intention.
Yeah, and it's kind of just fucked up because it's sort of like the moment that maybe they should have all gone into a rage was when Hazel got tricked. And
that made sense.
That would have been like them barging in, and getting in trouble and then separating despite the fact that they did something for each other. It just felt it felt as if like they were just like, well, the last scene is supposed to be this scene, and we've already been like dangling the reasons why in the whole entire film.
Like a lot of resources and time went into that last scene. But I think sometimes in film productions, when you have those set pieces where you're like, this is going to be like a core set piece, you can kind of forget to make sure that it goes along with everything else that's happened before and after.
Yeah. And I don't want to like harp on all the negative stuff because like one of the good things is that every character, every actor plays a straight man, and they also get to play the funny man.
And I feel like everyone was committed to their role. Nobody felt like they were phoning it in.
No.
It's just, I think it was the script that ultimately failed.
Yeah.
Because, like I said before, I just think it needed some more revision.
Yeah.
There were scenes like you were talking about when Hazel gets tricked and then the football thing at the end, and how some of those elements felt redundant or they could have been merged into a single scene.
Yeah, because like the thing when I'm talking about female rage, I feel like it was so absent from here, from the fact that we're taught at a young age to smile, or that like it is ugly for us to be angry, and that for at least have one character that breaks down crying, and when they're like, well, are you crying because you're sad, and be like, no, I'm fucking angry. Like, show the different like ranges of it, instead of just being like, oh, well, we're really horny and we want to stick fingers into other girls' vaginas, so we're going to do this fight club because it's going to make us look hot.
But then like when they kind of get it started, it just feels like they don't know what to do with it. And the film doesn't seem like it knows what to do with it either. And it just is like, okay, well, let's have a montage of them like beating each other up. Oh, okay, well then what's the consequence of that? I mean, I guess eventually one of the football players proves that the girls were lying about going to juvenile detention.
Yeah.
Like, and it's we were talking about violence in a movie like this, and there's a Rachel Sennett movie that I think actually handles violence better, and it's Bodies, Bodies, Bodies.
Yeah.
It's a violent movie. People die. But the film itself is using the violence to satirize a certain behavior that the filmmaker observes in people.
Yeah.
And this film does not do that. I don't know what it's observing. I know they were just basically trying to make, I guess, a mainstream high school comedy, and mainstream movies these days have to have like literal explicit bloody violence in them now in America.
And I think it's just sort of like, again, the one things that I like this, again, this is not a terrible movie. When I say it's mid, it's a 3.
Yeah, you're not going to waste your time watching it.
It's like 3 stars out of 5.
But like, I got to understand somebody watches it and then has no interest ever watching it again.
Yeah, and right? I think it's sort of like the kudos that I can give the director is that they used whatever lighting they could to make the lighting look good.
I think the lighting was well done. Yeah,
the shots were well like constructed. There's never a shot where you're just like, oh, that's terrible. Like, and there is also this ease in the actors when they are acting.
Yeah, everyone is perfectly cast.
So you're not in there thinking, oh, these hot girls are just gonna act like hot girls. Like, I did love, for example, like Isabel, like she's like talking about, her ex Jeff, and like Josie's like, oh, you must miss him. And she's like, yeah, I just miss when he would, touch my hair and go, shiny, shiny. And it's just sort of like,
well, like, yeah, the football player characters, I think they're one of the better elements because they play them in a way that's so unexpected.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, that's refreshing because you're so used to seeing certain like tropes used in high school movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I mean, I don't think it's going to be one of my favorite movies of the year, which makes me sad because Shiva Baby was in my top 20 of 2021, and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies with Rachel Sennett was one of my favorite films of last year. And I had thought that this would probably be a strong contender, but I think in the pursuit to make a mainstream comedy, undercut the sensibilities that Seligman brings to her films and her work that makes them so intriguing. Because like I keep going back to Shiva Baby and the way I was enthralled by the horror of that movie. And it's not a horror movie on the surface.
No, I mean,
but she makes it feel horrific. This movie, like I was saying, it didn't feel like it knew what it was or what it wanted to do. Real love crosses paths with unspeakable betrayal as Molly Burkhart, a member of the Osage Nation, tries to save her community from a spree of murders fueled by oil and greed. We are reviewing Killers of the Flower Moon, the latest film from legendary director Martin Scorsese, based on the nonfiction book Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. So, Ariana, it's Scorsese's kind of in his long movie period. It's 3 hours and 20 minutes. What are your just general thoughts about Killers of the Flower Moon?
It is not my favorite Scorsese movie. It is not to say that Leonardo DiCaprio did not give his all. I understand that's just sort of like, it's one of those films that I wish that he had picked a side that he wanted to focus on. It is a movie that I understand the critics that are from like that happen to be like Native American saying that they did not like the film. I completely understand that in like further thinking about it. This is a film that after watching it, I want to beg on my hands and knees if Martin Scorsese has another film left in him to just do one with Lily Gladstone as one of his main characters. Because it felt as if whenever he had the camera focused on her, he was trying new things and that he was just almost enamored with her face. That is one thing that I can say about it. And it's just how she can say so much without saying so little that like, I don't trust Hollywood enough for them to give her the roles that she deserves.
She says that she was on the verge of just moving back to, I forget what part of the States, or if she's from Canada, I'm not sure. But she was on the verge of leaving Hollywood when she got the call back for
she was like enrolling to become an accountant.
Yeah. I would say, I would agree with you. It's not one of my favorite Martin Scorsese movies, but I do think it is an incredible movie and one of the best films of the year, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I also understand how someone from the Osage Nation would feel discomfort watching this movie. The entire premise of the movie is about an incident in their history that is a horrible, traumatizing thing. But I would argue, maybe not with an Osage person, but a non-native person who wants to say they dislike the movie, if you feel discomfort when you walk out of the theater, that was the intent.
Yeah.
You are not meant to feel good when you walk out of this theater because there's nothing to feel good about generally with this movie. It's about a horrible thing, and we need to see this story. Now, there have been a lot of critiques, and they're very valid, that the film is centered on DiCaprio's character, Ernest Burkhart. And I would say for the first half of the movie, I didn't really feel that he was the central character. It just felt like Scorsese was spending a lot of time building out the world and showing us what was going on. And it wasn't until the second half where I really felt Burkhart became the focus. But I did read something from Lily Gladstone that I agreed with. And she was also talking about how she understands people who would say that. And her response was, do you think Hollywood is going to give an Osage director the level of a budget they're going to give someone like Martin Scorsese to make this movie? And she said, if we're being honest, they're not. She said, so while it may not be the perfect thing, this is the best we're going to get right now.
Yeah.
And so she was very thankful that she was able to be involved in this project, and especially in such a prominent role.
Yes.
I will say that I think DiCaprio's performance is really good. He's playing a character who is not the kind of character we often see in big Hollywood movies, where he is just the most weak-willed simpleton I've seen in a movie in a long time. And he is a very classic Scorsese character in that Scorsese is very interested in themes of redemption, particularly how bad can a person be and still be redeemed. sometimes in early Scorsese, he sees that, through the eyes of like God or the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Now he's kind of distanced that and is just more generally, can a person, be spiritually saved in some way, regardless of like the things they've done. And I think with the Ernest Burkhart character, he leaves it very open because this is a real person, and Burkhart's life did not go well after the events of what happened in this story. And you could say that, yeah, Burkhart lived out the rest of his life in a form of purgatory on Earth before he died. And that the Molly Burkhart character, his wife, does get a happy ending. She gets the happiest ending of anyone in the story, despite having suffered the most tragedy of anyone in the story.
Yeah.
She has a victory of a sort. I read an interesting review on Letterboxd from someone who is of the Osage Nation and lives in Oklahoma. And they were talking about this movie, and they said they were really excited when they heard Martin Scorsese was attached, because I think they understood from their perspective, to have a name like Scorsese means, oh, this movie is going to get seen by a lot of people.
Yes.
And if it had been some small indie picture, it would have toured at festivals, but it probably wouldn't have made much of an impact outside of that. But they said that as the years went on, they started to become more interested in their own Osage heritage. And there's a cultural center, I guess, in Oklahoma. They didn't specify where, but it's centered on this particular group of Native people. But funnily enough, when they contacted them because they wanted to work on getting their own Osage name,
Yeah.
the center had to decline them for the time being. And the reasoning was, they said, our facility is being so actively used by the production of Killers of the Flower Moon, we are not able to provide services for our tribal members for now. But later, this same poster said he spoke with one of the, I guess he was a chief, who said that he had never seen a film production about Native people in the US in which the cultural resources of that Native group were used as extensively as this movie. And I think you can see it in the way that so much attention is paid to the clothing of the period, the design of the houses of the period, the way the Native people were still practicing what we would see as, ancient forms of spirituality in the middle of this kind of 1920s, 1930s time period. So it creates this really interesting contrast of, we're watching technology progress, we're watching fashion change, but we're seeing these people unwilling to move from this thing. This thing at the core of them is very important.
Well, it's not even unwilling. They're willing to adapt to it. Because
I'm saying that their connection to the land is something that they're unwilling to change.
Yeah.
That they are connected to the land, that they're not giving it up, and that they're willing to share it.
Yeah.
But that's the extent. And so reading all of that and knowing a lot about Martin Scorsese, just, from reading and watching interviews with him, I think of all the great like American filmmakers, he's probably one of the most sensitive American filmmakers, both technically and thematically. On a technical point of view, he has such an eye and care for his shots and how things look and framing and blocking. He's also, I think, a great director of actors.
Yes.
He gets incredible performances out of actors, often very like muted performances that are subtle and nuanced. And I think you can just tell from this production and the things he said about it is he was not going to make a movie that he felt would be disrespectful to the people he was telling the story about.
Yeah.
How individual members of the Osage tribe and other Native tribes in America react to this film, it's valid because that's their reaction.
Yeah.
But I would try to say to people that if you don't feel good, that's kind of the point. You're feeling empathy for Molly if you don't feel good, because you're imagining what it must have been like for her, not only to lose all of these family members, but then to find things out about her own husband that she genuinely loved. And I think there is a part of him that genuinely loved her, but I think that goes back to the simple-mindedness of this character and the way he's manipulated by William Hale, De Niro's character, just speaks to how like there's a lot of white people that were used as tools and then tossed away when they were no longer useful, which should be a lesson to other white people now who are trying to be coerced into thinking there's some sort of community between them and like white supremacists, that no, you are a tool that's going to be used by them, and your time and effort would be much more valuable if you formed solidarity with marginalized groups and then used the whiteness that you have to protect them, to promote them, to fight for them.
Well, it's also sort of like it can be a horror story for people of color. It is this idea that you marry, and this, I mean, I'm married into a white man, but it's you marry,
and you haven't picked up that I'm poisoning your insulin. So.
It is this, especially because it's like the one thing that I remember telling you afterwards, which is not so much of like when you're watching Molly on the screen, you feel as if she at some point has become a trapped animal and she's willing to gnaw off her own like arm in order to escape, because she's surrounded with death and she's constantly trying to find a way out. And she doesn't realize, like Robert De Niro's character, who has embedded himself in the community.
Because I think it's key that he's a rancher. He's not working directly with the oil companies. Yeah.
So he has learned their language. He's there during the fucking meetings.
He's a philanthropist who like donates tons of money and resources to them. But it's all, there's that monologue she gives about the wolves. And it's the understanding that he is a wolf. He's stalking them. He's preying on them. He's luring them in.
Yes. And it is the fear that and this is something that I feel as if like, particularly like women of color, there is a fear. There's like this thing that we don't really talk about is when you marry outside of your race, some of the reasons why you marry it is because there is a toxicity that, you know, we don't want to talk about that sometimes is embedded either through white supremacy filtering within our culture, or just how the culture is in general. So you have this idea that the white man is going to treat you better, right? That you're going to be equal to him in some form of manner because he respects you, because he loves you.
Or then there's also the superficial thing of just simply, well, the white people have stolen all the resources, so if I hitch my wagon to the white people, at least I'll be comfortable.
And it is this knowledge that while Molly and her sisters are all like with white men, it is also knowing that the laws are written by white men. So, well, my husband can represent my best interests and then he will take care of me. Not knowing that he's also the one poisoning and killing all of them.
When I think there's a lot of things that aren't directly tied into the plot, but inform the world that Scorsese puts in that speak to that. The fact that the banker, he's played by, and I don't know the actor's name. He was in No Country for Old Men. He's the coin flip guy. Gene Jones, I think, is his name. He is the banker. And then later when we see a parade in town, we see him marching at the head of a group of KKK.
Yeah.
We also see that when he's in the bank and there are Native people there who are coming to transact money, he basically has assumed a parental role, and they have to justify to him why they want to withdraw the money before he allows them to.
Yeah, like he starts commenting on how much her mother had paid on groceries in the past. And so
that is an example of systemic racism. Someone pretending to be your friend, but who's part of a larger institution whose entire purpose and whose entire agenda is centered around keeping you from getting resources so that you're empowered.
Yeah.
Then we also see a newsreel that they're watching that talks about the Tulsa massacre, when that Black area of Tulsa that had, been able to find some financial prosperity for itself became the target of white hate and then was bombed from the air and blown up, and people were just straight up murdered. So the fact that he includes both those things in there is he is acknowledging these are also wolves, that the wolves are not people that are openly hateful. It's this embedded system. I also feel like a film that's a critique on capitalism through the oil business.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that when, for example, the tribe comes together and Molly is talking about getting a private investigator to come in and investigate all of the deaths that have occurred in her family. And while they're like talking about that, like, I'm trying to remember specifically now, there's white men in the room. And like they're all and like
But they're from William Hale's
Yeah.
group, so they're seen as like, oh, but you're on our side because you're not from the oil people.
and like the leaders are talking about like this oil is the reason why we're like this is horrible, and it was the white man's money that came in and paid us, that it's the white man's money that's like it's ruining everything. We need to go back to the earth because this is like they know the reason that these deaths are occurring.
And that was a great scene. I don't know who the actor was, but I'm pretty sure he's a genuine like leader in the Osage community. He just had that kind of like gravitas about him.
Yes.
And like delivers that monologue
And it's
so
like
well.
It's almost as if like, and also like the person who was besides him who was agreeing and talking, it like they're talking in what we would consider like deeply Southern accents, but they're like Southern mixed with native accents.
What's the people they learned English from?
Yes, and it's just like the way that they just are indicating that they know the reason why so many people of their tribe are dead. They understand why. They just know very well that the white men aren't going to come in and actually take care of this, that they are on their own. And only for it to have like the person who is like the full center and reason is there. And he's sort of like, yeah, you should investigate as to what's going on. This is horrible for you. And the targeting specifically of just only like leaving the women, which is a tactic that colonizers have used a ton of times.
You marry in and then you dilute the race and you turn them quote unquote white.
Yeah.
So then you can take ownership of the resources.
And like that's something that has happened broadly in Puerto Rico, which was like we studied that as part of the reasons why Puerto Rico became Puerto Rico, but only for it to be like now people being like, oh, Puerto Ricans are white people. I'm like, we're intermixed between African slaves and like the Tainos, who were part of the slaves that they committed once they came into the land. And they like Spain like was yeah, we interbreeded so we could say like, well, you had our sons, this land is ours.
What's to kill solidarity rather than like to join together in these unions of marriage as a way to form solidarity and support each other. It's used by colonizers to destroy the marginalized people and their culture.
And I think it's a film that unfortunately I don't know how much is going to stick with me besides the Lily Gladstone stuff. And I say that because it's like it was just the lingering on her face, like her expression. I mean, I know Leonardo DiCaprio did an amazing job, but anytime she was on screen, I'd probably be like, fuck you. I want to focus on her.
I was going to say it's for a director as old as Scorsese. He's in his 80s. And the fact that the most interesting things in the movie were not the things that he had honed his craft on. It was him trying out new stuff, either on a technical level or with her as his actress. That was the stuff that was most interesting. The other stuff isn't done badly, but we have such confidence in Scorsese when it comes to like, oh, he's going to do a montage that showcases the criminal activity going on over the course of time. I know he's going to do it well. Like, it's not going to wow me because I've seen him do it before, and it's not that he's being repetitive. It's just he's mastered that.
Yeah.
But whenever he's doing these like drone camera shots, which I don't know if I've seen too many drone camera shots ever in a Scorsese film.
I think my favorite shot is an upside down shot of like Lily. Mm-hmm. She's laying back and we see like her head. Mm-hmm. And it's such a beautiful shot, and the lighting that they put on her while she's like sick with her diabetes, like the thin layer of like sweat makes her skin glow. Mm-hmm. And how he manages to, with certain angles, and it's also like making sure that her like clothes are loose fitting, that you could just
give the appearance that like her weight is dropping. Yeah.
And it's just sort of like there is this delicate nature. The reason that I'm just like so in awe of it is because it is so rare for a Martin Scorsese film for him to linger on the women characters the way that he lingered on her. And like he is like open to be like, yeah, my movies are very male focused, except for like Alice doesn't live here anymore, which I listened to my actresses when they were explaining about how, you know, women felt during this time. and we're supposed to be lingering on Molly because Molly is basically like the representative of her people at the end. She's the last of her family line. She's the last that can like is holding on, and she's on the brink of death until she's taken into the hospital. And it just turns out that one of the FBI agents was also a native person who was able to like um blend into the background because he was like making himself into a medicine man. um it's the kind of like that's the stuff that I wish that was more focused on, because it's just like, yeah, I said it before, Leonardo DiCaprio did an amazing job, but there's just something about her as Molly that I was just like, I want to know more, or I want to see more of her with a certain director. Like, I'm more excited to hopefully see her career blossom.
Well, Scorsese, I would say that the reason we don't often see female leads in his movies speaks once again to, I think, his sensitivity. Is when Scorsese is like hitting everything right. I would say The Irishman is a film where like it's a perfect movie. And it's because he is recalling the voices of the people that he grew up around, which were Italian American criminal type of people. Most of his movies, if they're set in New York, are usually his best movies because that's a city he's intimately familiar with. And then he has these moments where he will go outside of his comfort zone and challenge himself with things like New York, New York. Even though it's set in New York, it's this big musical, or The Last Temptation of Christ, or Silence, or Kundun, movies like that. And they're not the movies where they're his best, though I would say Silence is very good. But there are movies where you can see he's trying to do something he hasn't done before, and he's paying so much close attention to that. But I think he's also reticent because he doesn't want to feel that he's speaking for someone that he isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he holds the Molly character in such reverence, is because he's trying to speak about her in a way that like shows complete respect for this character. Yeah. Even like the way the movie ends I've never seen a Scorsese movie end like that. I don't want to say how it ends because it comes as a surprise. Mm-hmm. But I like that moment really hit me hard because I was like, oh, he is serious about this movie.
Yeah.
Like he wants to make sure the audience is left with a particular emotional sensation when the credits roll in this movie.
I have complicated feelings on how it ended, even though I felt it was important to hear him say the things that he did say. It felt as if it was like another layer to be like, this is what you saw was fiction kind of thing. But again, like the reason that I don't have too much, that I won't argue it too much, is because when he read what was done, when he was, like you said, it was
a eulogy.
Yeah, like the moment he came on screen, it stopped feeling like he was putting a layer, going like, hey guys, this is a fictional thing, don't worry about it. It
suddenly felt real.
It felt real because it's like the way that he's looking at the camera being like, and now let me explain how their lives ended, so you're not left feeling as if like that Molly died of a broken heart over a man who was obviously trying to kill her.
Like it was clear that she moved on with her life.
Yeah. But it is like, and I like the fact that, for example, it was like a modern day like drum circle afterwards with like those Osage people, and that drone shot that was very well done. But yeah, like I'm going to have complicated feelings about this movie for whenever mentioned. It's like this weird thing that, like, again, like De Niro did great. I feel like it was one of his best performances in a long time.
He plays a villain, and that's not something I feel like we commonly like. Cape Fear, I know he played a villain, and I guess kind of in Meet the Parents, he plays a villain-ish character.
I mean, like, like one of his first
Rocky and Bullwinkle, he played.
No, I mean like the one was like the guy the Irish guy that joins like the Italian one that's basically like watching someone on cocaine at the end.
The Irishman?
No.
Because that is about an Irish guy who joined. You mean Goodfellas?
Yeah.
Where I feel like that's not as much a villain as it is like a mobster role.
Yeah, true.
as opposed to a lobster roll.
Lobster roll.
Like someone has to have made that sandwich. But yeah, I feel like De Niro here, it reminds us like, oh, this guy's really good. When you give him like a part that's good, he will nail it. And I feel like he really nailed like this character who is up to the very end oozing with like evil charisma.
Yeah, I thought it was. I like this role for him better than the role in The Irishman.
Oh no.
But that's my feelings.
Yeah,
So
you're wrong though.
I think it's kind of the way that this villain is portrayed. I like the fact that we don't make him look bigger than like Leonardo DiCaprio's character.
Yeah, he's just an old
In fact,
man.
he's like this old man, but turns out to be extremely intimidating at the end of the day.
When he's so manipulative.
Yeah, and it's like horrendous, and it's just sort of like, you know, and with like Leonardo DiCaprio, they have like great chemistry. They're very comfortable with each other. Also, one of the remarks that we said when we were watching the film, like Lily Gladstone is probably the oldest woman he's ever like made out with in a long time.
Yeah. I don't know how Leo handled that. But no, I know I've seen interviews where he just is like endlessly complimenting her and talking about like she was an incredible scene partner. Like they were able to just, and there are long scenes with just the two of them, and all they're doing is talking and reacting,
or just being like affectionate.
Yeah, and the scenes are just solid.
And I did love that there's like, it's almost like juxtaposed when it's, for example, Robert De Niro's character going like, she's too fucking stubborn, and then it's cut to Lily meeting the detective, like Lily gonna go to Washington even though she's
Molly, not Lily.
Like being like super sick. She's doing everything, and then he's sort of like, get control of your wife, and he does nothing to get in control of her because it's supposed to be like, oh well, he loves her.
Well, Ernest is just a weak character.
Ernest is just,
but that's the point of him, is he's weak and easy to manipulate, and that's why he has such a tragic ending. That if you had just like, if you genuinely love this woman and you just stood up for her, you would have been fine. Or
at the least, like, you could have just left with her and like.
Well, I mean, she wasn't going to leave her land. That's the thing. Is,
but I think it's just,
he couldn't leave with her.
But it was also just being like, having told her what was going on.
Yeah, be honest.
Or just be honest. It was because it's like, it gets to the point that you feel as if Molly is willing to forgive anything from him, but you understand she has her boundaries.
Well, I feel like that the way Gladstone plays Molly, you kept talking about her, she's stubborn. So someone who hasn't seen the movie may have a different picture of her. But what I liked is she is stubborn, but stoic. She's not someone who is the way Hollywood has created this kind of cliche badass girl boss kind of thing. There's a restraint in Molly's emotions, which to me makes sense because you think her people have suffered so much that you have to have a tighter hold on your emotions because life has been so endlessly tragic. And it's in the moments where she is confronted with the fact that another family member has died, that's when you see her emotions come out. So it's her strongest emotions are reserved for the greatest moments of pain.
Oh yeah.
And in between, she has to like keep herself calm. Otherwise, you lose your mind in a situation like this.
Well, like one of the indicators at the end, when you think about why it is that Molly is so silent throughout the film, despite the fact of being sick, is Robert De Niro's character tells Leonardo DiCaprio's character, he's like, when you are around them, you hold your tongue, you let them talk. They're not going to talk a lot, and I know you're wanting to fill the space with all because you got to talk. And he's spending time alone with Molly at her home.
Where there's the scene that I think it was the first image that was leaked from the movie, and it's them sitting next to each other on the same side of a table, just as a thunderstorm is going through, and they're not saying anything. And every time he
opens his mouth, she's like, "Be quiet."
And he goes to pour the whiskey, and she just puts her hand on the bottle, and he puts it down. And so, even though the film doesn't explicitly tell us that there is an Osage spiritual belief connected to a storm passing overhead, which you can infer, right? I'm able to feel that and understand like, oh, he's out of his element right now.
Yeah.
He's needing to learn how she operates in this world so that he can operate that way too.
Yeah.
Now, the FBI element of the movie is one that I would say if there's an element I didn't like, and it's not too big, But there is this sort of glorification of the FBI, and there's a few mention of J. Edgar Hoover's names. And I would say if the FBI ever helped out a non-white group, that was purely by accident. The FBI was never designed to help non-white people.
Well, remember, like when Jesse Plume's character Tom White, finally comes into town, they do scold him. It's like, so it took us $20,000 for somebody to finally come and investigate. And like you can see like this low, like a little bit of shame because he's just like, well, I'm here. And they're like, well, we don't give a fuck. This has been happening for years. Like it's not so much as a thumbs up. I think they kind of glorified a little bit by being like, oh, well, they had a native guys.
But I do feel like the FBI part was not as much of it as I assumed it was going to be. And based on the title of the book it's based on. So I'm assuming that in the book, there's more of a emphasis on the FBI investigation.
Yeah.
But I think Scorsese was smart in making the movie about Ernest and Molly.
Mm-hmm.
And letting the FBI thing just be kind of this is going to be, I mean, I wouldn't say this movie's 3 acts. It's probably a 5-act structure. Mm-hmm. This is more like the 4th act. We introduce the FBI.
Yeah.
So overall, do you consider this one of the best films of the year?
Probably, yeah.
Probably? Definitely. Definitely. You probably rate The Flash higher, right?
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and
I might see both those films, probably.
Maybe, I don't know. Do either of those films have Jack White as a radio show actor in them? I don't think so. So I would say, yeah, definitely one of the best films. No going in. It's a time commitment, 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And there are moments where it will feel long because there are moments of, long, quiet stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that's necessary for the tone to be correct, for Scorsese to get across what he's trying to say. And I would say it's going to go in that category of great films when Scorsese goes out of his comfort zone.
Yeah.
Like Silence or something like that. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to check out the show notes for links to our other reviews over on popcult.blog. Also, make sure that you subscribe wherever it is you listen to this podcast so that you'll be notified when new episodes are up. If you visit popcult.blog right now, you're going to find we've just kicked off a series looking at some of the best films of French director Agnès Varda, which I've really enjoyed, and I think every film that we watched out of them would have been a 5-star to 4-star movie. Once we're done with that, we'll finish off November with a series that are just basically some films about America, which include Kelly Reichardt's Wendy and Lucy, Lars von Trier's Dogville, Werner Herzog's Strozek, among others. We hope that if you enjoy what we do on the podcast and the blog, that you consider supporting us on Patreon. We have different reward levels to pick from, and I'll thank our patrons. We have Morphine, who donates at the sneak preview level, and Becca and Matt, who donate at the writer's room level. If you donate at that writer's room level or higher, you'll get to pick one movie a month for us to watch and review. You can even include your own thoughts in that review if you wish. If you donate at any level on our Patreon, that will get you access to our patron-exclusive podcast mini-series. We are currently in the middle of Screenplay, which is a series where Ariana and I are doing a GM-less co-op tabletop roleplay experience. We did world building in the first episode, created a hook for our story, and the first full episode of Play just got published, where we're figuring things out, developing the mystery, playing through. It's a lot of fun for us to play. I hope it's a lot of fun for you out there to listen. Well, until next time, you keep listening and we'll keep watching.